Hi everyone, I'm Julie. Now, I work down on level 1 in Fisher Library, and that's where Rare Books is located. And everyone can use this. All we need you to do is to bring some ID. You can send your mum in. She can use this. You can send your cousin in when they're visiting and maybe they're a history buff or an engineering history buff. They can come in and look at the resources there. The reason I'm doing this is to try and give you, you know how you sort of like writing an essay and you think, oh yeah, there's, you know, I've sort of searched and read these books. You see a few pictures and you think, oh yeah. Do you know, when I was looking at these, who's heard of Hogarth? Anyone heard of Hogarth? Look, I've seen that sort of, you know, that image of the gin. I saw that in researching for this talk I was giving you. When I saw that, all of a sudden seeing it in front of me, it kind of changed the way I was viewing it. I also noticed that I was observing the information in a different way. I was relating it differently. Oh, here's another one, Life in London by Pierce Egan. When you see this image, it's in a book about this big, and looking at it, it's like, oh, wow, oh, and what's that? It's like seeing it in the flesh, as it were, or in physical format. You engage with it much more intimately. I don't know what it is. I am totally pro-digital sort of renditions. I think it's fantastic. But also, don't forget that seeing the physical work itself is fantastic, and you do relate to the image in a book differently, especially illustrations. So keep that in mind if you need... I was thinking, maybe these history students might get a bit, oh yeah, I've just got to churn out another essay. I feel like I'm in a sausage machine or something. Just think, actually, I need some inspiration. I'm just going to call in at Rare Books and get a little bit of a vibe or spark happening.
It's a bit like seeing a famous painting online and going
to the original. So true. And then sometimes you think, oh, I thought that painting was going to be yay big. And it's like, minute. Yeah, those things are really good, and they keep us... It gives you a sort of a heartfelt relationship with things, which inspires you. Now, the image on the right from Life in London it's meant to illustrate the varieties of life in London at that time, and we can see from the title page on the left that's 1821. However, that was when this was printed. Life in London was originally printed earlier as sort of series, sort of a journal. And it was a comical monthly publication, okay, by Pierce Egan. And it was very, very popular. Its central characters were Tom, Jerry and Logic, and they were very well-heeled young guys around about the town, and they were really keen to see a little bit of life in the poorer districts of London. And they'd get up to these, you know, escapades and shenanigans as they explored, you know, how the other half lived. These sort of, you know, jigs they got up to were based very much on Pierce Egan and the three illustrators, George and Robert Cruikshank and Isaac Richard. You can find I think Life in London, there's a series on the BBC. I got this information and this suggestion to use it from the BBC website. Okay, so there's probably a bit more about that on the BBC. Now, Life in London, I'm going to show you a few things from this book. So here's Tom, Jerry and Logic amongst the unsophisticated daughters and sons of nature. And Pierce Egan wrote that the group was motley indeed: lascars, blacks, jack tars, coal heavers, dustmen, women of colour, old and young, and a sprinkling of the remnants of the once fine girls, all jiggling together. And I'm getting a good... Look, this is fantastic. Sort of, here's one of the toffs of the story, sharing his booze. Okay, here's Jerry in training for a swell, and who knows what a swell is? You know, all the swells. Okay, I heard the term. I didn't need to look it up. It's sort of like a well-to-do kind of proud kind of guy. You know, the swells. Again, we've got Tom, Jerry, and Logic, and they are, I don't know, getting outfitted for their sort of like shenanigans around town. You see what was important in society at the moment, and in sort of what a swell thought was important. We've got dogs and horses and portraits of those. We've got riding boots. It's just sort of like smoking jacket, which I remember from the Addams Family. And so we're getting a really good idea and a deeper idea of how people dressed, what was being mocked. Okay, so humans always have pretensions, and in the 18th century there was no exception. And based on Rena's wigs and things that she opened with, it's like pretension was an all-time great from the look of those wigs. Tom and Jerry at the coffee shop. Now, coffee shops have a very, very interesting history. In the late 1600s and early 1700s, there were as many as 3,000 coffee shops in London. And it was where a whole lot of debate and deals went down there, lots of gossip happened. In fact, King Charles II tried to ban coffee shops. It was because that's where the disaffected met, and so there'd be, strife brewing. That proclamation didn't last very long, though. By the mid-18th century, you'll think, but London's a tea-drinking society. The mid-18th century, it was becoming much more tea-drinking. But coffee shops had this very interesting role of disseminating information. What have I got now? Tom and Jerry taking the Blue Ruin. Okay, who's heard of the Blue Ruin? Rena has. No judgment on Rena and her social life. You what from that laughter? You must know. It's talking about gin. I've heard gin talked about as mother's ruin as well. And so here we have the Blue Ruin. I also read that one of the reasons that Egan's life in London was very successful was because it used contemporary slang. And so we've seen a few of these: swell, Blue Ruin, and he got a job editing the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue, which had been pre-published, but dictionaries, they do update them. And so Pierce Egan edited it in 1823, and here's a few of the phrases that were around at the time. Here we go: a swell, a gentleman, but any well-dressed person is emphatically termed a swell. Knowledge box is the head. There were a few amusing things there. So this is one of the books we hold in the Rare Books Library. It's one of the books out of our MacDonald collection. And on the PowerPoint, I'll make sure that the call numbers for each of the books I'm showing you are there. Okay, and so you can trace terms, and that tells you a lot about the style of language and also what was important in the day. We're still on Tom and Jerry. These guys, I just love these illustrations. There must be 100 illustrations in this book, in this Life in London. Look, Tom and Jerry became, at the time, synonymous with young men causing disorder, okay? So it became one of those, going out, like Tom and Jerry, that kind of use of that phrase. No, were they based on? I thought of the cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry. I don't know if that's the same. I don't know if the creators in American cartoons had seen Egan's life in London. And here are Tom and Jerry's girlfriends, Kate and Sue, and they were caught having their fortunes read. So this is one of the ways that a sort of like a genteel young lady might go and entertain herself with her friend and have a bit of a laugh. Here's William Hogarth. I mentioned him earlier. Most of you have heard of him. We have Hogarth volumes, sort of like, these are some of the works of Hogarth that I thought you might be interested in. He produced artwork that he entitled The Rake's Progress. And The Rake's Progress was painted in 1733. Now, you'll see these two illustrations I've chosen are featuring quite a bit of booze and the consequences of drinking too much. Alcoholic drink and drunkenness was a big feature in society. and it was considered the norm for all classes. This is the Rake's Progress. It follows a character called Tom Rakewell, who spends a night of booze-fuelled debauchery in the company of prostitutes, and this is him imitating what he believes that the aristocrats would do. Okay, so he's sort of like living like an aristocrat, and it goes through and sort of shows you his shenanigans. I'm sort of citing this from, let's see, from the British Library. Now, their website, I found, had a lot of information. It was featuring certain rare books that they hold, and some of which we hold here at the Rare Books Library here, and it went through and would sort of talk a bit about it. It was saying that the depictions of drunkenness, it features in James Boswell's diaries from the 1790s, and it talks about how polite company would sort of just drink to total oblivion. Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger was famed for being a 3 bottles a day man who thought nothing of attending the House of Commons after downing a bottle of port. And businessmen and aristocrats were often events where they were often sort of like wound up in singing, hollowing. I'm not sure what that means. H-O-L-L-O-W-I-N-G. I should look up my vulgar tongue.
Like H-O-L-L-E-R, hollow.
Yeah, this is hollow, hollowing. Okay, thank you for that. And wrangling, drinking, toasting and spewing. Okay, and one of the contemporaries in that time recalled drinking was the fashion of the day. Okay, so we think we've got a problem, you know, with lockouts and stuff now. No, this is like human history. Nothing unusual there. More of the Rake's Progress. On the left, the consultation of physicians, and what's here on the right? The enraged musician. Okay, we've got a baby squealing, we've got a little boy urinating, we've got little drums, just, you know, the cacophony of the times. Little cats up here. Masquerade and operas at the Burlington Gate. So more entertainment, so I was showing you here. And times of the day. Hogarth went through and had a series, Times of the Day. And this seems to be, in the morning. Notice how dark it is in the morning. We'll get a bit more about the darkness of Britain later on. France and England, his sort of portrayals of that. I don't know if any of you are thinking about France in your essays. And here's the one I mentioned earlier, the Gin Lane, and it's quite a it's a very well. It's in some ways it's overused, but I think sometimes these things are overused because they just capture perfectly what was going on and the consequence of what was it called, the Blue Ruin. Now, apparently there were 2 works. There was Beer Street and Gin Lane. I've noticed in this it's called Beer Street and Gin Lane, but my idea, I get the impression there were 2 different illustrations really, and there was it was done as part of a campaign against the uncontrolled production and selling of cheap gin, which culminated in the Gin Act of 1751. And 1751, after the Gin Act, the number of gin shops dramatically reduced. Now, the picture is set in the poor parish of St Giles, and you can see the mother's busy sort of like trying to get her snuff together, pinch her snuff together, and is, you know, totally too out of it to care that her baby's sort of like falling out of her arms. There's a lot of details in these sketches. It's kind of like Where's Wally for grown-ups, I found. Each time I was looking at these illustrations, it was astonishing, all the detail. Can you see the person, what is it? There was one here. Person's body being visible in the upstairs window, and apparently there's a woman's body being loaded into a coffin. You can see that, just in the middle, near the middle to the left of the picture. There's, you know, dealings going on. There's sort of people exchanging their, you know, their carpenter's saws and things for, so they can get money to buy more gin. And there's a mother there pouring the gin into the mouth of her baby to sort of calm the baby down. The houses are all going to ruin. You can see in the top right-hand corner there's sort of like a bit of quite a lean on one of those houses. The bricks are falling off. Anyway, pretty horrible way to live your life, and also the social conditions of sort of like health consequences, and just imagine walking through that street and sort of dodging the you know, the vomit, and everyone's probably urinated everywhere, and I don't know, babies on the ground, children crying, people not caring. These images give me a really sort of like connection, a good connection with what was going on, aside from when I read, oh, they had a gin act in, you know, whenever it was.
Do you think that's a church at the top?
Yes, it could be.
Very background.
This one,
Yeah.
I can see close up that it looks like a man at the top of that, though, not a crucifix, so, and not Jesus on the cross, but yeah, sort of like a statue. You know, with Google Maps, you might want to sort of see, hey, what is that man still on the top of that spire? Industry and idleness were major themes. And we see, you know, oh, look, couldn't even fix the bed. And the weighing house. Listen, I don't know if you're interested in this, but I found it fascinating. It's like this beautifully illustrated example. And each of the men you'll see have a letter, and so A is absolute gravity. And what it is there's 9 men in a half circle between the ground and the weighing beam at the top. And what it's showing is the intellectual weight between dumbness and foolishness. So I just sort of put that in as a, you know, like a novelty. Now, the cries of London. There were a lot of books published about the cries of London, and we have this book. When you see it, it's just a small little item like that, and it's got the most fantastic illustrations. And there's a few illustrators that have been used in this edition. They're like these books were a visual record of the London lower classes, who, you know, the peddlers and street hawkers, and, you know, the milkmaids and grocers, who were sort of like selling their stuff on the streets, on the city streets, and they would advertise what they were selling with a cry or a song or a melodic rhyme. And this book, here's the little book here. Let's see, you maidens and men, come for what you lack and buy the fair ballads I have in my pack. And so you can see she's selling some sheets of music there of her. So it was obviously a collectible thing in the time as well. Okay, stinking fish, that was his cry. And here's your toys for girls and boys. Okay, and there's some text on in these volumes as well that you can get a sense of marketing then. And I included this because I wasn't sure if Rena was going to go into, how silly of me, of course she was going to go into the databases like 18th Century Online, which is absolutely brilliant, okay? Travel accounts is another source you can use quite well for finding out about the influence on society in London and France, or London and Paris. So don't forget, if you see travel accounts, they're fascinating and give you a lot of information about where that person's from and what's being observed. Welfare. Okay, you can't have Gin Lane and not have someone feeling compassion and wanting to help out people who are sort of struggling to bring up their kids without gin. And apparently there was quite a smell that travellers would sense on their approach to London, And also, apparently letters sent from London had a bit of a sooty odour. And it was so dark in London that they'd talk about sort of like having to light candles inside to sort of see around shops and things. I'm sure you've all heard about the open sewerage in those years, running down the gutters, and just how walking down a street was sort of like I don't know if it's a minefield, but sort of like you had to dodge a whole lot of things you didn't want to step in. Horse manure, butchers would throw things out. This is another slide where it's sort of talking about Cork. It's a book on, I got these two slides out of order, The Ancient and Present State of the County and City of Cork, written in 1750 by Charles Smith. They were interested in improvement. They were interested in how people used to live their lives. So here's a site, an ancient heathen temple site, and it's from this book. They were interested in, we often get very pretentious and think we're the only ones who are interested in digging up bones and seeing, how people died and things. These are the bones of the son of William, the son of John Clark. I'm reading from this little text copy down here. A soldier in Sir Richard Aldworth's company, born in Newmarket in 1677. He had I'm not sure what disease he had, but it very much affected his bones and organs. He could only eat mashed up food with a knife, and yet he had quite a life. And in this book you could go on and read about it. There were a few pages following this. Cooking. Shopping became a really important cultural activity in the 18th century, and you can notice a connection between the luxury goods that started being brought in alongside slaves from South America and the Caribbean. And so this obviously meant, different spices around, different preservatives. I've copy and pasted just some of the more interesting contents in this Art of Cookery book. Distilling is mentioned in most cookery books of the time, I've noticed, but not necessarily mentioned is a certain cure for the bite of a mad dog. And so you would sort of like make up these sort of home cures in your kitchen. And this is the contents of that lovely, beautifully bound book, The Art of Cookery Made Plain and Easy. I'll point out, it's by Hannah Glass, who here it's mentioned, it's by a lady, okay, so she was respectable. And the other thing I liked is this subheading, which far exceeds anything of the kind yet published. So I think I should send this into the Gruen transfer for advertising claims. A few other pages from this Art of Cookery. To make hysterical water. Now, I don't know whether this is sort of like a calming or a stimulating drink, but you think calming?
Yeah, so hysteria is a disease that affects
Okay. So you could try that, but make sure you can get your hands on some mugwort. And a few things there might be a little bit hard to source at the moment. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, to make plague water. And I sort of felt quite sad when I was reading this list, because you see all of those ingredients, and so I got a sense of how desperate people were. I mean, we know now through science that this is not going to have any effect at all, and just, it was like compassion for what they were trying to do at the time, which didn't affect the plague. Okay, The English Spy. Here's another title that was distributed. And again, this gorgeous frontispiece, the lower and the upper classes. This Billingsgate Markets, okay, it really has been sort of going a long time, and it was one of the places people would be out all night and then they might go in and have a sort of like a laugh at the coarse-mouthed women at 4 a.m. in the morning, because that's when it would open, of course. The coarse-tongued nymphs of the fish market. And so in this book, The English Spy, we have two ladies going down to entertain themselves. And then when they were fatigued with the mobbing and the thrusting and the filthiness characteristic of the place, they went home. And just know they couldn't stand it too long. They were soon fatigued. Slavery in England. In 1765, the trade was of over 25,000 Africans via the Liverpool ships alone. And that slaving dramatically increased throughout that century. Smallpox, another disease. William Hillary was a very interesting medico, because he also realised there was a link between air and disease, and sort of like the hot, humid air and sort of like disease breeding. John Hunter, another one, you would have heard of him, very prominent surgeon. He was one of the first to use comparative anatomy to help solve medical problems. Okay, look, I hope I've given you a little flavour of the wealth we have. Now, you can let us know you're visiting and we'll get the books out ahead of time for you. And you can just bring your student ID. Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 4:30 is when we're open. We're on level 1 of Fisher. And look, just be aware when you come that it's one of those places where, you know, the most promising students really can achieve their potential. That's according to the strategic plan of the university. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, Julie.